Good evening. I'm your host, and tonight we dive into a story that's reshaping global trade conversations, a statement from former U.S. President Donald Trump that could redefine America's relationship with one of its most important partners, India. It began with a few unexpected words from Trump himself, words that hinted at a turning point, not just for Washington and New Delhi, but for the entire global marketplace. He said, "We're very close to a fair and comprehensive trade deal with India, and soon we could be lowering tariffs on India."
You know, we're making a deal with India, a much different deal than we had in the past. So right now they don't love me, but they'll love us again. We're getting a fair deal, just a fair trade deal. We had pretty unfair trade deals. They're very good negotiators, sir. Just you have to take a look at that, if you would, please. But we're getting close, Scott. I think we're pretty close to doing a deal that's good for everybody, right? In the old days, do you think Biden would ask that question? I don't think so. He'd say, "How are we doing with India?" He didn't know about India. He didn't know.
In his familiar, confident tone, Trump added, "India may not be very happy with me right now, but they'll like us again. It's going to be fair for everyone." That single remark caught the attention of diplomats, analysts, and traders across the world, because behind those lines lies years of tension, negotiation, and strategic balancing between two democracies that together represent nearly 1/5 of humanity. A new signal from Washington. For months, the economic conversation between India and the United States had been defined by tariffs, trade deficits, and geopolitical friction. Washington had accused India of unfair market barriers. New Delhi had criticized America's protectionist stance. But Trump's latest words seem to offer something different, a signal of softening, a hint that the world's largest and oldest democracy...
How close are you to a deal on the trade deal with India? Are you willing to consider lowering the current tariff rate?
Well, right now the tariffs are very high on India because of the Russian oil, and they've stopped doing the Russian oil. It's been reduced very substantially. Yeah, we're going to be bringing the tariffs down.
What kind of level are we talking about here?
I mean, at some point we're going to be bringing them down. Without tariffs, this country would be in such trouble, as they were for many years. That's why we owe $38 trillion. And one of the things we're going to do, we're going to issue a dividend to...
Democracies might finally be ready to rebuild economic trust. Why does this matter so much? Because for years, US-India trade has been a tale of potential versus problems. India, one of the fastest growing major economies, wants greater access to the US market. The US, meanwhile, wants fairer terms, lower tariffs, and more reciprocal trade conditions. The result has often been a cycle of optimism followed by frustration. So when Trump, known for his America First policies, suddenly spoke about reducing tariffs on Indian goods, it raised eyebrows in every major capital. The long road to friction. To understand the weight of that statement, we have to step back a few years. When Trump entered the White House, he was determined to narrow America's trade deficits. China, the European Union, Mexico, and even close allies like Canada came under scrutiny. India was no exception. At the time, the US had a trade deficit of roughly $24 billion with India, meaning America imported far more from India than it exported there. That gap became a political talking point. Trump repeatedly called India a tariff king, arguing that American companies faced high import duties and complex regulations. In 2019, the US administration withdrew India's preferential trade status under the Generalized System of Preferences, a program that had allowed billions of dollars in Indian exports to enter the American market duty-free. It was a major blow to sectors like textiles, jewelry, and machinery. India, in turn, retaliated by imposing tariffs on American agricultural and industrial products. The result? A trade relationship that had once been expanding rapidly started to freeze under layers of suspicion and frustration. The Russia factor enters then, came a new flashpoint, one that had less to do with tariffs and more to do with geopolitics. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United States led a coalition of Western nations, imposing sweeping sanctions on Moscow's energy exports. But India, driven by its growing energy needs, continued to buy discounted Russian oil. From New Delhi's perspective, it was simple economics. Energy demand was soaring. Russian crude, offered at heavy discounts, provided a vital cushion for inflation-sensitive markets. But from Washington's standpoint, India's oil purchases seemed to undermine the Western effort to isolate Russia economically. The two friends found themselves on opposite sides of a moral and strategic divide. That's the context in which Trump's new statement becomes so interesting, because it suggests not confrontation, but conciliation. He told reporters that Prime Minister Modi had, quote, almost stopped buying Russian oil, a claim New Delhi has never officially confirmed, and that the US was therefore considering lowering tariffs on Indian goods. In essence, Trump was trying to link energy diplomacy with trade diplomacy, using the language of incentives rather than pressure. Behind closed doors, inside Washington, analysts read Trump's remarks in different ways. Some saw them as political theater, an attempt to project statesmanship ahead of another election cycle. Others viewed them as a genuine recognition that America needs India as a partner, not an adversary, in shaping the global economic order. For Trump, it's a strategic narrative. He positions himself as the deal maker who can fix what bureaucrats couldn't. For India, it's a sign that US leaders are once again seeing value in long-term cooperation instead of short-term confrontation. And make no mistake, both countries have a lot to gain. The US is the world's largest economy, and India the fastest-growing large one. Together, they account for more than a quarter of global GDP and almost 20% of global population. From technology to defense, pharmaceuticals to digital services, their economic destinies are deeply intertwined. At the heart of every trade negotiation lies one question: trust. When Trump raised tariffs on Indian goods, in some cases up to 50%, he said he was protecting American workers and manufacturers. But those same tariffs also made it harder for US companies that rely on Indian components, materials, and software services to operate efficiently. For India, the issue was about fairness. New Delhi argued that its tariffs were still lower than many developing nations and that American goods enjoyed robust demand inside India's booming consumer market. Behind the numbers lies a story of perception. America sees India as a market giant with too many barriers, and India sees America as a partner that sometimes forgets the constraints of an emerging economy. So when Trump suddenly talks about cutting tariffs, he's not just changing economic policy, he's changing tone. He's saying, in effect, that cooperation is more profitable than confrontation. The world has changed dramatically in just a few years. China's rise has reshaped manufacturing and supply chains. The war in Ukraine has disrupted global energy markets. And the pandemic exposed just how dependent the world had become on a few economic hubs. In this volatile environment, the US sees India as both a counterbalance to China and a crucial node in the reimagined supply chain network. American tech giants have already invested billions in India's digital economy. Defense cooperation has grown stronger, with joint production of jet engines and drones on the horizon. So when Trump, or any US leader, talks about easing trade barriers with India, it's not charity, it's strategic self-interest. It's about building resilience, diversifying supply lines, and deepening ties with a democratic partner that shares key security interests in the Indo-Pacific. Global markets react. When Trump hinted at lowering tariffs, global investors noticed. The Indian rupee strengthened slightly against the dollar.